Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast, and thanks for joining us for today's deep dive. Imagine, if you will, trying to fit the entire weight of a human life. 80 years of laughter, heartbreak, little idiosyncrasies, the exact way they took their coffee, the sound of their voice, trying to fit all of that into a piece of paper exactly 2 inches wide and 8 inches long.
Right. It's a lot.
It's massive, and if you get it right, it becomes this permanent daily tether to a lost loved one. But if you get it wrong, it's just, well, another piece of clutter. Or worse, it's something that actively damages the spine of your family Bible.
Yeah, which nobody wants. It sounds like this impossible architectural challenge, really. You are essentially being asked to compress a massive, multidimensional, complex existence into, about 16 square inches of two-dimensional space?
Yeah, exactly 16 square inches.
Right. And you're being asked to do this exact task at a moment when your own cognitive abilities are, honestly, completely compromised by acute grief.
Yeah, that tension, that push and pull between the profound emotional weight of a life and the really strict physical limitations of a tiny piece of paper. That is exactly what we're exploring today. So today we are looking at something uniquely touching, incredibly practical, and honestly highly specific. We're talking about the art, the psychology, and the hidden mechanics of memorial bookmarks.
It is a subject where pure utility just collides head-on with the most intense human emotions imaginable.
It really is. And our mission today is to pull apart a truly fascinating guide. We're drawing on excerpts from a piece called Designing Meaningful Memorial Bookmarks with Templates, which features some incredibly insightful material from a resource called the Funeral Program site. We are going to examine how these small, carefully constructed paper keepsakes carry just massive psychological weight for the people left behind.
Yeah, they really do punch above their weight class, so to speak.
They do. And I want to make something clear right up front for you listening. While the perimeter of this entire conversation naturally revolves around loss and grief, it's the Funeral Channel Network podcast. The actual heartbeat of what we're going to talk about today is the celebration of life.
Exactly.
We are going to dissect the psychology of visual design, the hidden neuroscience of beauty, and the surprisingly potent healing power that people find in the physical act of creation.
Which is really the hidden engine driving this entire process, What we're exploring here is how professional design principles, things usually reserved for, like marketing agencies or architects, when you combine those with structured templates, it actually empowers families.
Right.
These tools give people a way to take a chaotic, beautiful lifetime of memories and just distill them down into a tangible artifact. And they do it during a period when, frankly, most people can barely decide what to eat for breakfast.
Let alone design a visual masterpiece.
Exactly.
So I want to start by unpacking the psychology of what we're actually talking about here, the portable keepsake. Because this is where everyday function meets raw emotion. The source material points out that memorial bookmarks are small, they are portable, deeply personal, and they serve this dual purpose.
Right. Functional and emotional.
Yeah. They are functional, yes, but primarily emotional. They are designed specifically to be kept inside books or journals or Bibles. And as I was reading this, I just couldn't help but think about the stark difference between a standard funeral program, the kind you get handed when you walk into the actual service, and a memorial bookmark. To me, a standard funeral program is a lot like a wedding invitation.
Oh, that's interesting. How so? Because structurally, they're quite different.
Yeah, structurally, sure, but think about the life cycle of a wedding invitation, right?
Okay.
They are absolutely stunning. You get them in the mail, you feel the thick cardstock, you admire the gold foil calligraphy.
Right, the embossed lettering, all that.
Exactly. And you might put it on your fridge for a month or two leading up to the event. But what happens the day after the wedding?
It comes down.
It comes down off the fridge. It usually ends up tucked away in a drawer or maybe a memory box in the attic. Or, let's be honest, the recycling bin.
Yeah, sadly, a lot of them end up in the recycling.
Right. Because it is an event-specific document. Its purpose basically expires once the cake is cut. But a bookmark is like your favorite coffee mug.
Oh, I like that.
You don't put your favorite coffee mug in a glass display case to look at it once a year. You use it every single morning. It becomes completely, seamlessly integrated into your daily routine.
That is the phenomenal way to look at it, actually. And if we pull the lens back to look at the broader psychology of human grief, what you were describing is the psychology of continued use.
Continued use.
Yeah. Grief is notoriously isolating, During the formal service, you were surrounded by people, flowers, eulogies, and there's structure. It's a structured event.
You're kept busy.
Exactly. But after the crowds go home, after the casseroles stop arriving, and those physical programs are put away in a drawer, that is when the true heavy reality of the loss really sets in. It happens in the quiet, everyday moments.
It's always a random Tuesday evening sitting in the living room when it suddenly hits you.
Precisely. So by placing this specifically designed bookmark in a daily journal or, say, a novel you're reading before bed, the tribute naturally extends far beyond the artificial boundary of the funeral service itself.
It sneaks into those quiet moments.
It really does. It provides comfort. It transforms from a simple piece of mourning stationery, which is basically just a notification that an event happened, into an active daily reminder of connection.
Wow.
You are literally weaving a piece of that person's legacy into the physical habits of your everyday life. They offer a sense of presence that outlasts that initial shock of the loss.
It acts almost like a tether, a physical paper tether to a memory.
Yeah, a tether that you interact with tangibly.
Yeah.
You touch it. You see the colors when you mark your page. It serves a functional purpose, keeping your place in a story, while simultaneously serving an emotional purpose, keeping their place in your life.
Keeping their place in your life, that's beautifully said. But, if these objects are going to be interacted with daily, potentially for decades, their physical structure and their layout cannot just be random.
No, absolutely not.
They have to be incredibly intentional. So let's talk about the literal physical architecture of this canvas. Because the source points out that a standard memorial bookmark is almost always vertically oriented, measuring somewhere between 2 to 3 inches wide and 6 to 8 inches high.
Yes, very specific dimensions.
Right. And there is a very strict division of labor between the front of the card and the back of the card. So going back to my initial thought, how on earth do you curate an entire human life into a space that is only 2 inches wide?
It requires a ruthless editorial mindset, to be honest,
Oh.
which is why the division of labor you mentioned is so critical. You have to understand how the real estate of that 2 by 8 inch canvas works. So let's look at the front of the bookmark first.
Okay, the front is usually described as the visual anchor, right?
The visual focal point.
Yeah.
Yes. The front must draw immediate, undeniable attention. It acts as the introduction, or rather the reintroduction, to the person.
Mm-hmm.
It typically houses the deceased's name, their birth and passing dates, and the single most crucial element, the photograph. This side is entirely about presence. Imagine you are reading a book on a train and you open it up. The very first thing that happens is you make eye contact with the photograph.
Oh, wow.
It is an immediate visual recognition that totally bypasses the logical brain and triggers a direct emotional memory.
And then naturally you flip it over.
Exactly. You turn it over to the back. And the back functions as the emotional core. Because the back doesn't have the large photograph dominating the space, this is where the text gets to breathe.
Right, it's less crowded.
Yeah, this is the domain of reflection and comfort.
Mm.
It's where you find the poems, the specific scriptures, the short personal messages, or perhaps a very brief biography. If the front of the bookmark boldly states, this is who we lost, the back gently whispers, this is what they meant to us.
It's a literal dialogue happening in your hands. You see their face, you remember their laugh, and then you flip it over to read the words that capture their essence or offer you some kind of philosophical or spiritual solace.
Yes, a literal dialogue.
But I want to linger on those dimensions for a second. 2 to 3 inches wide by 6 to 8 inches high. That is such a highly specific set of numbers. It feels like this size wasn't just pulled out of a hat by a printing company. It must have evolved to become the standard, right?
Oh, it's entirely dictated by the physical constraints of its intended environment, meaning the inside of a bound book.
Oh, of course.
Think about the engineering of a standard book.
Right.
If a bookmark were wider than 3 inches, say 4 or 5 inches, like a standard index card, it would stick out past the edges of the standard mass market paperback.
Right, and it would get ruined.
Exactly. Over time, those protruding edges would get bent, they get frayed, and torn off in your bag.
Okay, so then what if it was thicker, like a folded greeting card? Why not do that to fit more info?
That is where you run into structural damage to the book itself. If you take a thick, folded piece of heavy cardstock and leave it wedged into the middle of a book for 5 years, it places unnatural stress on the binding.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, you could actually crack or warp the spine of a cherished family Bible or a rare first edition simply by leaving an improperly sized keepsake inside it.
Okay, that makes total sense. You are trying to honor a memory, not destroy your home library. But then, why not just make it an inch wide? Why not make it a tiny strip of paper?
Well, because then you sacrifice the human element. If you drop down to a 1-inch width, you simply do not have enough real estate for legible, dignified typography. And more importantly, you wouldn't be able to clearly see the facial features of the person in the photograph.
It'd be like a postage stamp.
Right. You would be reducing their face to a thumbnail.
Hmm.
So that 2 by 3 by 6 by 8 dimension is the ultimate ergonomic and emotional compromise. It slides comfortably into a book without causing structural damage, yet it provides just enough canvas for a clear, intimate portrait and readable text. It is a brilliant example of functional constraint.
Functional constraint. I
Right.
love that. But, understanding the theory of what needs to fit into that tight space is entirely different from the reality of actually designing it. Building a layout from scratch, especially while your brain is fogged by the acute trauma of losing someone, that sounds like an insurmountable mountain to climb.
It is for most people.
Which brings us to a really fascinating part of the role of templates. The source material states that families dealing with grief almost always lack the energy or the technical expertise to design something like this from the ground up. So, templates from specialized resources like the funeral program site provide a structured foundation. They offer placeholders for photos, preset text boxes, and guarantee proper alignment. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a minute because I have a visceral reaction to the word template.
Let's hear it. Why does that word bother you?
Okay, when I hear template, my brain immediately goes to rigid corporate slide decks, you know?
PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly. I think of generic, sterile resume formats that you download for free off the internet. I think of something mass-produced and entirely devoid of a soul. Isn't a rigid cookie-cutter template the exact opposite of what you would want for a deeply personal, fiercely unique, once-in-a-lifetime memorial tribute?
That is a completely understandable knee-jerk reaction.
Mhm.
We're totally conditioned to view templates as a tool for enforcing conformity.
Yes, conformity.
But you have to view the tool through the lens of the psychological state of the user. In a corporate setting, a template creates uniformity. But in the context of profound grief, a template completely changes its function. It stops being a cage and becomes emotional scaffolding.
Emotional scaffolding. Wow, that is a great visual. Walk me through how that works in practice.
Okay, consider what happens to the human brain during acute grief. People experience a severe form of cognitive overload. It is a well-documented psychological phenomenon where executive function just plummets.
Like decision fatigue.
Exactly. Decision fatigue sets in immediately. When you are grieving, deciding whether to put on black shoes or brown shoes can feel like trying to solve advanced calculus.
Yeah, standing in the grocery store aisle just staring at cereal boxes.
Exactly. So imagine asking that same overwhelmed person to open up a blank, terrifyingly empty digital design document.
Oh man, like opening a blank Photoshop file.
Yes. You are asking them to figure out the exact pixel dimensions, calculate the bleed margins for the commercial printer, set up a balanced visual grid, and mathematically decide where a text box should logically sit in relation to an image. It is utterly paralyzing.
You're basically asking them to become a professional graphic designer and a structural engineer on the absolute worst day of their life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is where the true value of these templates comes in. The templates provided by places like the funeral program site bridge the massive gap between user-friendly ease and deep customization. They remove the heavy cognitive load of structural math.
Right.
The template essentially whispers to the family, do not worry about the alignment. We have already calculated the exact optimal distance between the photograph and the name to ensure it looks beautiful. We know exactly where the poem should sit so the card doesn't look crowded.
Wow, so it takes the burden off.
It does. By offloading those complex, invisible technical decisions to a professional framework, it liberates the family. It frees up their severely limited emotional energy so they can focus entirely on the choices that actually carry meaning.
The emotional choices, right? They don't have to decide where the photo goes on the page. They just have to focus on which photo perfectly captures the way their mother smiled with her eyes.
Exactly.
They don't have to fiddle with the line spacing of the text. They just have to sit together on the couch and choose the poem that speaks to their heartbreak.
Precisely. It provides a safe, structurally sound container for their memories. They don't have to build the house. They just have to decorate it with love.
I love that. And that idea of decorating the house is where this gets really interesting, because how do you actually breathe life and specific personality into a pre-existing structure? That is the real magic trick of design. How do you translate a human personality into a visual theme?
It's a delicate process.
The guide makes it clear that choosing the right foundational template design is paramount, because the overarching aesthetic must genuinely reflect the personality, the lifelong interests, and the core values of the person who passed. It gives examples like choosing lush floral themes for someone who was a master gardener or deeply traditional religious designs for someone whose faith was their bedrock.
This is the moment in the process where the template stops being a mere technical framework and begins to function as a narrative device.
It makes me think about it like dressing a memory.
Dressing a memory.
Yeah. If you are trying to honor an uncle who was, say, the life of the party, a guy who wore loud Hawaiian shirts, blasted classic rock, and laughed louder than anyone in the room, you wouldn't dress his memory in a stiff, muted charcoal gray suit.
Right. That would feel entirely wrong.
Right. You would want the colors, the energy, and the vibrancy of the design to match the vibrancy of how he actually lived.
That is the exact underlying logic of stylistic categories. When you look at the varieties offered by industry leaders like the funeral program site, they don't just offer one style. They break their templates down into distinct aesthetic categories: classic, modern, scenic, faith-based, vintage. Each of these represents a different wardrobe for the memory, to borrow your analogy. And the most powerful tool within those wardrobes is color psychology. The guide explicitly touches on how color dictates the emotional temperature of the bookmark.
Let's pull on that thread. What is the actual psychology behind the color palettes we choose for these spaces?
Well, the guide notes that soft, muted tones are traditionally used to convey a profound sense of peace and serenity. We're talking about gentle pastels, soft sky blues, muted sage greens, or warm, earthy taupes.
The spa color.
Right, the spa colors. And from a neurological standpoint, these colors literally lower our visual heart rate. They don't demand aggressive attention from the eye. They provide a calming, quiet visual environment, which is often exactly what a grieving mind craves. Muted colors speak with a quiet, enduring dignity.
But the text also makes a point to mention brighter, bolder colors, which feels like a bit of a departure from tradition, doesn't it?
It is a massive cultural shift. Historically, particularly in Western cultures, mourning materials were strictly monochromatic: black, white, slate gray, or incredibly subdued. It was about solemnity above all else.
Very Victorian.
Exactly. But modern memorialization has pivoted heavily towards celebrating the life lived rather than solely mourning the death. So the guide points out that brighter colors are now frequently chosen to celebrate a vibrant, joyful life.
Yeah.
If you are honoring an artist who painted in bold, saturated primary colors, or someone who adored bright yellow sunflowers, choosing a template bursting with vibrant yellows and rich greens is a profound act of honoring their authentic, lived self. The color palette ceases to be just a design choice, becomes a distinct biographical detail.
The color palette as a biographical detail. That is a brilliant way to phrase it. And there is another crucial detail the guide emphasizes regarding these themes, and that is the concept of cohesion, the cohesion factor.
Yes, cohesion is key.
It states that the design of the bookmark really needs to complement the other funeral stationery. So the large folded programs, the small prayer cards, the welcome posters at the entrance. But why is that cohesion actually important? Is it just about making the event look like it was professionally planned, or is there a psychological reason behind matching the stationery?
Oh, it goes much deeper than aesthetics or looking professional, though a polished look is certainly a nice byproduct. This touches on the psychology of environment and immersion.
Immersion.
Consider the mental state of someone attending a funeral. They are often disoriented, anxious, and overwhelmed by sadness. When a family creates a cohesive design theme across every single touch point, from the large welcome poster at the chapel entrance, to the program you hold tightly in your hands during the eulogy, to the prayer card, and finally to the bookmark you slip into your pocket to take home, they're constructing a unified, immersive environment of memory.
You are building a world for that specific memory to live in for the afternoon.
Exactly. You are giving the attendees a singular, consistent visual language to associate with the celebration of that person's life. If the welcome poster is bright and modern, but the program is formal and gothic, and the bookmark is covered in pastel watercolor flowers, it subtly creates visual friction.
Yeah, it would feel disjointed.
It adds to the feeling of chaos and disorientation that grief already brings to the table. Cohesion, on the other hand, creates a subconscious sense of order, deep respect, and intentionality. It tells the attendee, we have carefully considered every aspect of how we are saying goodbye.
I see. So once that overarching theme is established, once the visual wardrobe is selected and the cohesive color palette is locked in, The family moves into the true micro level of personalization. And this is where the artifact really comes to life, I think. The photos, the words, and the fonts.
Right, getting down to the details.
The source states that true personalization involves inserting high-quality photos, which could be single portraits or collages, selecting deeply meaningful text like poems, scriptures, or quotes, and choosing the right typography, like script, serif, or sans serif fonts.
This is the granular molecular level of the design. This is where the broad strokes of a theme are sharpened into the precise, undeniable essence of the individual.
And what always amazes me is how delicate the chemistry of these elements really is. I mean, you could take the exact same smiling photograph of a person and put a very rigid, formal, traditional font right next to it, and suddenly the whole bookmark feels like a solemn, historical document.
Yeah, it feels distant.
Right. But if you take that exact same photo and pair it with a loose, casual, handwritten style font, the entire emotional tone shifts. Suddenly it feels warm, approachable, like a letter from an old friend.
That happens because both the imagery and the typography carry their own distinct, undeniable voices. They are communicating with the viewer before a single word is actually read.
Let's look at the imagery first, then, because the guide is very clear that the photograph plays the central, anchoring role in personalization. The text gives what sounds like very basic, practical advice, right? The photo must be clear, well-lit, and appropriately cropped to fit the specific constraints of the template.
Yeah.
It sounds like Photography 101.
It does, but the stakes are incredibly high here. In a space that is only 2 inches wide, a photo that is poorly lit, blurry, or cropped so far away that you can't see the person's expression, it loses all of its emotional impact. You are asking that tiny image to carry the weight of their entire presence. You need to be able to see their eyes.
And the guide makes an interesting distinction here between using a single portrait versus using a collage of photos. What is the difference in the story being told there?
It is a difference between a powerful monologue and a sprawling documentary film.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A single portrait offers striking, immediate intimacy. When you select one clear, beautiful, well-lit photo of the person looking directly toward the camera, it creates a direct, one-on-one, almost parasocial connection with the viewer. It isolates a singular moment in time and declares, this is their core identity.
And a collage.
A collage, however, is cinematic. It shows movement through the timeline of their life. It might show them as a young, nervous parent in the 1970s, then laughing on a beach vacation in the 90s, and finally holding a newborn grandchild. A collage tells the broader narrative of a life well lived, whereas a single portrait distills their entire presence into one powerful, unending gaze.
And once you establish that visual connection, whether it's the intimate gaze or the cinematic timeline, you have to pair it with words. The guide talks about how the chosen message, verse, or poem adds necessary emotional depth, because a bookmark can't just be data, right?
Wait, nobody wants just a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It can't just be a spreadsheet listing a birth date and a death date. The words have to capture the philosophy of the individual.
The guide highlights that common choices include famous poems, comforting scriptures, or inspirational quotes. But the most crucial insight from the funeral program site is the importance of including text that deeply resonates with the family and genuinely reflects the individual's personal beliefs.
So not just picking the first poem you find online.
No, you are essentially searching for the exact phrasing that sounds like something they would have said or something that perfectly encapsulates the way they treated people. The words on the back of that card become a permanent proxy for their voice.
Which transitions us perfectly to the actual visual voice of those words, the typography. The guide notes that typography plays a massive role in the overall feel of the keepsake, and that fonts must be easy to read while complementing the overarching design. It breaks typography down into 3 main categories: script, serif, and sans serif.
Typography is a fascinating psychological tool because it is largely invisible to the average person until it is done wrong.
Yeah, people only notice fonts when they hate them.
Exactly. Fonts absolutely speak to us. The guide explains that script fonts, the ones with sweeping cursive loops, add an immediate sense of elegance and grace. Because they closely mimic the fluidity of human handwriting, they feel inherently personal, fluid, and deeply intimate. They are very often used for the deceased's name to give it the gravitas and personal touch of a signature.
But you wouldn't want to use a loopy script font for a dense 5-stanza poem on the back of the card, right? That would be exhausting to read.
Oh, it would be visually exhausting. It would be a nightmare for older relatives to read, which is exactly where the other font families come into play. Serif fonts, these are the traditional fonts that have the little feeder tails at the ends of the letter strokes, like your standard Times New Roman or Garamond, provide structural clarity.
The classic book fonts.
Right. They carry a subconscious sense of tradition, grounding, and authority. They're excellent for the body text of a poem or a long scripture because the little feet actually help guide the eye horizontally across the line of text, making it easier to read in small sizes.
And then there are sans serif fonts.
Yes, sans serif fonts. The clean, straight letters without the little feet, like Arial or Helvetica. These feel incredibly modern, crisp, and straightforward. They are unpretentious. They're often used for the dates or the factual details because they offer clean, undeniable clarity.
But the guide does offer a very specific warning here about typography. It acknowledges that combining different font styles can create wonderful visual interest, but it heavily warns about the need to maintain balance and avoid visual clutter when mixing them.
That is a critical professional warning. If you mix a heavy, dramatic script font for the name, a deeply traditional serif font for the poem, and a bold, ultramodern sans serif font for the dates, all crammed into a 2x8-inch rectangle, the voices start yelling over each other.
It's like a ransom note.
Exactly, it becomes visual noise. The brain doesn't know what tone to interpret. Maintaining balance usually means picking just two fonts. Perhaps an elegant script for the name to provide a personal touch, paired with a highly readable serifus for the poem, so they complement each other without constantly competing for the viewer's attention.
And avoiding that visual noise, avoiding that feeling of a cluttered, chaotic design, requires a genuine understanding of professional graphic design principles, which, as we established earlier, the templates handle for you automatically.
Thank goodness.
Right. But I want to pull back the curtain on how those templates actually achieve that harmony. I want to look at the invisible math of a beautiful layout. The guide breaks down visual appeal into 4 foundational design principles: balance, contrast, alignment, and white space.
These 4 principles are essentially the invisible laws of physics that govern whether a piece of visual media feels deeply chaotic or profoundly calming.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever looked at a piece of paper, maybe a flyer stapled to a community bulletin board or a really badly designed diner menu, and actually felt your stress levels rise just by looking at how crowded and disorganized it is?
Oh, absolutely. The diner menu with 90 items crammed onto one page.
Yes. How do these templates prevent a memorial bookmark from triggering that exact same stress response?
Well, that feeling of rising stress is a physiological response. It is your brain struggling to process too much unstructured, competing visual information all at once. It takes active cognitive energy to decipher chaos.
And we don't have that energy when we're grieving?
Exactly. The templates prevent that cognitive drain by rigorously mathematically applying those 4 pillars. Let's unpack them exactly as the guide does, starting with balance.
The text describes balance as distributing elements evenly to create a harmonious layout.
Yes, but it is important to understand that balance does not necessarily mean perfect mirror image symmetry. It doesn't mean everything has to be dead center.
Right.
It means visual weight is distributed so the bookmark doesn't feel like it is going to tip over. If you have a very large, dark, visually heavy photograph at the top of the card, you need an anchor at the bottom, perhaps a block of text or a darker graphic element to balance out that weight.
Otherwise, it feels off.
Right. If all the heavy elements are at the top, the design feels top-heavy and anxious. Templates provide pre-calculated layouts where that harmonious distribution of weight is already built in.
The second pillar is contrast, using contrasting colors and sizes to highlight information, improve readability, and draw the eye to the most important elements.
Contrast is all about establishing a hierarchy of information. It is the designer's way of telling the reader's eye exactly where to look first, where to look second, and where to look third.
Okay.
The text gives the highly practical example of using dark, rich text against a light, soft background to ensure maximum readability. If you use pale gray text on a white background, the eye strains to read it, which causes frustration.
I hate when websites do that.
Everyone hates it.
Yeah.
But contrast also applies heavily to scale and size. Making the person's name significantly larger than their birth and death dates is a strategic use of size contrast. It guarantees that the most important element, the human identity, is the very first thing processed by the brain.
Then we have the third pillar, alignment, creating a clean, organized appearance.
Alignment is the direct cure for the stressful, chaotic diner menu you mentioned. When text and images are properly aligned, whether they are perfectly centered down the middle or sharply aligned to the left margin, it creates an invisible, stabilizing grid on the page.
Our brains like grids.
The human eye is biologically wired to seek order and pattern. Alignment provides that soothing order. When elements are even slightly out of alignment, when a text box is a millimeter to the left of the photo above it, it creates a subconscious sense of unease. The brain senses that something is off.
Yeah, even if you can't put your finger on it.
Exactly. Professional templates lock every single element onto a precise mathematical grid, completely eliminating the risk of a messy, unsettling design.
And finally, we arrive at my absolute favorite concept in this entire document, white space, also frequently referred to as negative space. The guide points out that this is often the most overlooked element by amateurs, but it is highly important. It refers to the empty, unprinted areas around the design elements, and it is what prevents the design from feeling suffocatingly crowded.
White space is, without a doubt, the single most crucial element when you are designing for grief. Amateurs look at empty space on a page and think, I need to fill that with a flower graphic or another quote or a border.
Right, they want to maximize the space.
But white space is not just empty space. It is highly active space. It is the pause between the notes in a piece of music. If a song's just continuous blaring notes with absolutely no pauses, it isn't music anymore. It is just noise.
Wow, yes.
The pauses are what create the rhythm and the emotion. On a memorial bookmark, the white space allows the photograph to breathe. It allows the final line of a poem to be fully absorbed by the brain before the eye is forced to move to the next piece of information.
The guide specifically notes that it contributes to a calm and elegant aesthetic.
Exactly. When you are reading a deeply comforting scripture on the back of a bookmark, you desperately need that physical blank space around the text. That empty perimeter allows the profound meaning of the words to settle into your mind.
If the text is crammed right up to the very edges of the paper, it feels rushed.
Rushed, frantic, and claustrophobic. White space provides visual silence. And in times of intense mourning, when the world feels incredibly loud and overwhelming, visual silence is often the very thing we crave the most.
Visual silence. That is such a beautiful, striking way to put it. Now, once the digital design achieves this perfect balance, once you have established this visual silence and calm aesthetic on a glowing computer screen, it has to be translated into the harsh reality of the physical world.
Yes, it has to become real.
Right, because a digital PDF file cannot be tucked inside the pages of a novel. The tactile, physical quality of the bookmark is every bit as important as the visual design. Which brings us to the physical artifact itself, the tactility, the printing, and the finishing touches.
This is the critical threshold where a digital memory takes physical, tangible form. This is where it becomes real.
The core information from the guide states that these bookmarks should be printed on high-quality cardstock or laminated paper. It notes that lamination resists wear and tear. Tassels can be added for elegance. The printing itself can be done professionally or at home. And lastly, proofreading is absolutely essential. Now, when I think about the physical material, the actual paper, I compare it to holding a flimsy, thin, easily torn grocery store receipt versus receiving a thick, heavy, deeply embossed invitation. Huge difference. The physical weight of an object literally tells our human brain how important the information on it is.
That reaction is deeply rooted in our evolutionary sensory processing. Tactility, the way something feels in our hands, is a massive, undeniable part of how we form and access memory.
Oh, absolutely.
When we explore the materials specifically recommended in the text, heavy cardstock and protective lamination, we're really exploring the concept of longevity. The guide explicitly states that these keepsakes are meant for long-term use. If you print a deeply meaningful, beautifully designed tribute on standard, lightweight, 20-pound printer paper, the very first time it gets caught awkwardly in the pages of a heavy book, it will crease permanently. Over the years, the natural oils from human fingertips will degrade the ink. It will disintegrate.
So selecting the right material isn't just about making it look expensive. The material itself is a literal form of protection for the memory.
Precisely. High-quality, heavyweight cardstock gives the object immediate physical dignity. It feels substantial and important in the hand. It demands respect. And lamination, as the guide points out, is a functional necessity if you expect this item to survive daily handling.
Especially coffee spills.
Oh, yes. It protects the fragile paper and ink from accidental coffee spills, from unexpected tears, from the friction of being moved from a nightstand to a briefcase, or from book to book over the course of decades. It permanently seals the tribute in a protective, clear layer.
And then the text mentions the option of adding a tassel, which on the surface seems like a purely decorative, almost frivolous small detail. But I feel like adding a tassel changes the entire nature of the object.
It absolutely does. Adding a tassel elevates the item from being a mere piece of printed stationery into a functional, elegant tool. A tassel acts as a tactile cue.
A tactile cue.
Yeah, when the bookmark is resting inside a closed book on a shelf, the body of the bookmark is hidden, but the tassel hangs out over the spine. It becomes a physical, inviting anchor that you can pull to open the book and access the memory. It bridges the hidden inside of the book with the visible outside world.
That's lovely. So, how does this physical artifact actually get manufactured? The guide discusses the printing dilemma, the practical trade-offs between utilizing professional printing services versus printing the bookmarks at home. And resources like the funeral program site are designed to offer flexibility for both paths.
It is a highly practical choice that families must navigate based on their specific circumstances. Professional printing, as the guide outlines, ensures a premium result. Professional printers have commercial-grade machines that guarantee precise cutting, which ties directly back to that principle of alignment we discussed earlier.
Right, no crooked edges.
Exactly. If a border is printed, a commercial cutter ensures it is perfectly symmetrical. The industrial inks ensure the colors are deeply saturated and vibrant, and they can apply a flawless polished laminate finish. It yields a premium, commercial-grade, physical product.
But home printing has its own distinct, very important benefits, right? It isn't just the lesser option.
Not at all. The guide highlights the profound benefits of convenience and cost savings. If a family is operating under severe time constraints, perhaps they only have 48 hours before the service, or if they're operating within a very strict limited budget, the ability to download a professional template, printed on their own high-quality cardstock using a home printer, and carefully cut it themselves is incredibly empowering.
It puts the power back in their hands.
Yes. It completely removes the financial and logistical barriers to creating a truly beautiful, dignified tribute.
But there is one crucial step the guide calls out as absolutely essential before you ever hit that print button, regardless of whether you are sending the file to a commercial printer or doing it in your own living room. And that is the crucial pause for proofreading.
Yes, you have to proofread. The source insists very firmly that proofreading for spelling errors, checking for accidental alignment issues, and verifying image quality is a simple yet absolutely essential step to prevent devastating mistakes.
Because it is so incredibly easy to accidentally misspell a middle name or get a birth year wrong by a single digit or use the wrong iteration of a poem, especially when your brain is completely fogged by grief and lack of sleep.
Oh, absolutely. And discovering a glaring spelling error on a permanent laminated tribute after it has been printed and handed out to 100 family members at a service is a heartbreaking, frustrating experience.
It's the worst feeling.
It is a distraction from the mourning process, and it is entirely easily avoidable. Taking that crucial deep breath to review the design carefully. Perhaps asking a friend who is slightly removed from the immediate grief to look it over with fresh eyes ensures the final result reflects the absolute dignity intended.
You know, talking extensively about this entire process, the careful proofreading, the tactile selection of the paperweight, the agonizing over the perfect font, the emotional debate over which photo to use, it makes me realize something profound.
What's that?
This process isn't just a logistical chore to be checked off a massive to-do list for a funeral. The act of making these difficult choices, of engaging with the material, is actually a vital, active part of the grieving process itself, which leads us perfectly into the final and perhaps most important aspect of this entire topic, the healing act of creation.
This is undoubtedly the most profound psychological point the source material makes. The design process is not just a means to an end. The process itself is deeply inherently meaningful.
The guide states that creating something tangible brings a necessary sense of purpose and a measure of healing during times of overwhelming loss. Furthermore, it says that memorial bookmarks create a powerful sense of unity and shared remembrance when they are finally distributed to friends and family. I just see so much incredible beauty in this process.
It really is beautiful.
It is not just about logging onto a website, clicking a few buttons, and blindly ordering a generic product to hand out at a door. It is an active, highly personal way to channel chaotic, overwhelming grief into a focused tribute that honors a totally unique life.
If we synthesize everything we've discussed today, from the templates to the colors to the fonts to the physical paper, it all connects back to the overarching psychological theme of empowerment.
Empowerment and grief.
Yes. When someone you love passes away, you are entirely stripped of your control. The loss happens, the universe acts, and you cannot stop it. You are rendered helpless. But the act of creating this specific, beautiful tribute gives you a small, vital measure of control back. Templates from trusted sources like the funeral program site don't just sell you a digital PDF file, they facilitate a deeply therapeutic exercise.
A therapeutic exercise. Let's sit with that for a second.
By providing that safe, professional, structured framework, we talked about the emotional scaffolding, they allow families to safely navigate the turbulent waters of their own memories. Think about what the process requires. You sit down at a table, you open old photo albums, you debate whether he looked happier in the photo from 1998 or the one from 2005.
Yeah, you tell stories.
Exactly. You discuss which poem Aunt Mary loved the most or which scripture guided her life. You actively decide that she would have wanted the bright, vibrant floral colors, not the muted, somber grays. In doing this, you are actively, intentionally engaging with her legacy. You are not just remembering her, you are defining how she will be remembered. And by doing that, you create an enduring, physical symbol of your love.
And it is a symbol that you don't just keep for yourself. It is a symbol that you distribute. The text specifically mentions creating a sense of unity when shared with friends and family.
Yes, grief is incredibly heavy to carry alone. By taking the time to create these bookmarks, by printing them beautifully, and by physically handing them to the attendees at the service, you are, in a very real, poetic way, distributing the weight of the memory.
That's a powerful image.
You are giving everyone who loved that person a small piece of their legacy to carry forward into their own everyday lives. You are ensuring that the memory of this person doesn't just reside in your own isolated mind, but that it lives on, actively, in the daily reading habits and the quiet, solitary moments of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of other people.
What a profound way to look at something that seems so simple on the surface. Let's take a moment to look back at the immense amount of ground we have covered in this deep dive. We started by exploring the functional and emotional power of a portable 2 by 8 inch paper keepsake.
Right.
We explored how it acts as a permanent daily tether to a loved one, sitting on a bedside table or tucked in a favorite book, completely unlike other event-specific stationery that just gets filed away and forgotten.
And we examined the extreme, specific physical constraints of its architecture, how the front of the card acts as the immediate visual focal point to establish presence, while the back serves as the quiet, emotional core for reflection.
Yeah. We tackled the paradox of choice and how structured professional templates act as vital emotional scaffolding. They completely remove the paralyzing cognitive load of design math so that grieving families can focus purely on the emotional task of personalization. We look deeply at how color palettes, whether they are muted tones designed to bring serenity or bright colors designed to project vibrancy, actually act as specific biographical details of a life.
We took a fascinating masterclass in the invisible mechanics of beauty, too, understanding exactly how balance, contrast, alignment, and the highly crucial visual silence of white space all work together to prevent cognitive overload and create a calming, dignified aesthetic.
And we grounded all of that theoretical digital design firmly in the physical world. We explored how the sensory weight of high-quality cardstock, the protective nature of lamination, and the tactile, inviting addition of a simple tassel work together to protect the memory for decades of long-term use.
Decades, yeah.
And finally, we arrived at the understanding that the careful, sometimes agonizing act of assembling these photos, these fonts and these words, is not just a chore. It is in itself a profound, empowering, healing act of creation.
It is a truly remarkable journey. You start with an impossibly blank page and a heavy heart, and you end with a deeply meaningful physical artifact that can outlast us all.
It truly is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, listening right now, with a question to ponder. We've spent this entire time talking about how we encapsulate the massive, complex lives of others into these tiny 16-square-inch spaces. But take a moment and think about yourself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about the legacy you're actively building. If you had to distill your own life, or the absolute essence of someone you love most in this entire world, into a physical space no bigger than 2 inches by 8 inches, what single defining image would you choose?
That's a tough one.
What specific color palette would accurately represent the energy you brought into a room? And what few, carefully chosen words would you want to leave behind, resting quietly in the pages of someone else's daily life?
That is a staggering question. It really strips away the noise and forces you to consider what parts of your character and your legacy are truly the most essential.
Exactly. It clarifies everything. Thank you so much for joining us on this unique, surprisingly technical, and incredibly moving deep dive. We hope this conversation encourages you to look at the keepsakes in your own life, those little, seemingly mundane artifacts tucked into your books, resting on your desk, or hiding in your wallet with an entirely new sense of appreciation for the massive emotional architecture they hold. Keep exploring, keep remembering, and until next time.